This summer, Palestinians in Gaza were pounded by Israeli bombs. More than 2,000 people died, a quarter of them children.
I feel so angry. This is war crime.
Incoming. Get down.
We find out what it's been like for Israelis living under a barrage of Hamas rockets from Gaza.
Nobody can live with this situation. Nobody.
This war's fueled anger, not only in Gaza, but around the world. We investigate how and why battles were fought in tunnels deep underground.
Those terror tunnels, their whole purpose is just to kidnap and to murder Israelis.
Peace talks are due to begin, but what has either side achieved in this war of the tunnels? Asma Al Ghul is going to her old family home for the first time since it was bombed by the Israelis. She hasn't dared to come here till now. It's August, the fighting's still going on. There's a ceasefire today, but the area's a Hamas stronghold, and Asma fears it could be hit again any time.
It's my home. That room, my mom and our sister and brother always used to stay.
This relative survived, but 9 other members of Asma's extended family died when her uncle's house was bombed.
My mom, brother.
How old was the youngest child who died?
أصغر ولد قديش كان عمره؟
كان عمره 20 يوم.
20 days.
20 days, just 3 weeks old.
كان مع توأم ولد صغار اثنين.
Twins.
One of the twins died. The other survived but is injured.
This home, I know everything. This home, all my memories until I was 7.
Parts of Gaza have been devastated. More than 100,000 are homeless. It's the 4th war here in less than a decade, and the bloodiest yet.
For weeks, bombs pounded Gaza, and rockets roared from here over the border into Israel. It seemed like a showdown between Hamas and the Israeli army. But what were both sides trying to achieve, and why was the cost in civilian lives lost, overwhelmingly here in Gaza, so high?
Israel was trying to protect its communities here in the south, which have always borne the brunt of Hamas attacks. I headed to a hill near the town of Sderot, overlooking Gaza. A ceasefire was supposed to be in force, but it wasn't long before we found out what living under fire is like.
Incoming. Get down.
We just heard a mortar come whistling literally overhead and landed just a few hundred meters to our right here in the Israeli village over there. So we're getting out of here now.
In the car, we heard a rocket had also just hit Sderot.
Well, hang on a minute. Should we take cover?
Let's get started.
Yes.
The rocket hit a house when the family were out. The physical damage may not look that great, but there's a psychological impact. Thousands of rockets have hit Sderot over the years. 3 people here have died.
You see what they try to do to us? To kill people innocent. That's what they try to do. Nobody can live with this situation. Nobody. In all the world.
Hi.
In a bomb shelter, I found 4 children from the house, taken there by the babysitter before the rocket attack.
Okay.
Many Israeli children have had to spend the summer in shelters. A neighbor whose own home had been hit a couple of days before blamed Hamas and his own Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu.
بيبي يفتيح شيء شكت انت شكت يشبه بيبي يفتيح شيء شكت
איזה שקט יש פה? תגידי, איזה שקט יש פה? כשהוא מכניס 200 משאיות אוכל לחמאס? זה מצדיק את המדינה הזאת? איזה הפסקת אש זה?
Sderot's had to put up with Hamas fire for years, but the Israeli government wasn't prepared to stand by when major cities and more than 1 million people were threatened. Just 27 miles long, the Gaza Strip is home to 1.8 million Palestinians. It was occupied by Israel until 2005. I was in Gaza 2 years later, when Hamas took charge, ousting the more moderate Palestinian Authority government. Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by Britain, America and Europe. The militant Islamist group has sworn to destroy Israel. When Israel imposed a blockade on Gaza, Hamas dug tunnels into Egypt to smuggle in everything from household goods to weapons. Last year, when a new Egyptian government destroyed those tunnels, Hamas lost its economic lifeline, seriously affecting its ability to govern.
By the start of this year, Hamas couldn't pay the salaries of its public workers, and its leader warned the people of Gaza there were hard choices to be made.
Hamas was preparing for a showdown with Israel to ease the blockade they claimed was strangling Gaza. The trigger was pulled, not in Gaza, but on the occupied West Bank near Hebron in June. A Hamas cell targeted 3 Israeli teenagers hitching home from boarding school into Israel. One of them was 16-year-old Naftali Frenkel.
Somebody stopped, apparently Israeli, with an Israeli license and wearing Jewish garb.
The boys got into the car, but quickly realized they were in trouble. One of them made a phone call to the police. It was recorded. Then there was the sound of muffled gunshots.
After the shots, silence was very, very scary. It's every parent's nightmare. Their child shouldn't get home from school.
Israel cracked down, destroying the homes of the suspected kidnappers. They arrested hundreds of members of Hamas. After 18 days, the bodies of the teenagers were found. In an interview with Panorama, the leader of Hamas took responsibility for the killings.
Hamas hasn't avoided responsibility for this event. Hamas cells did it, but in the context of self-defense against Israeli occupation and settlement policy.
2 weeks later, another boy, Palestinian Mohammed Abu Qadir, was the victim of a tit-for-tat murder. His father described how Mohammed was seized from outside this shop in East Jerusalem.
Put him in the car.
The man who abducted Mohammed was an Israeli with a history of mental illness. He was helped by 2 youths.
Killing him was the worst crime in history. They poured petrol in his mouth, on his body. He was still alive when they set fire to him and ran away.
With tensions boiling over, Hamas fired a barrage of rockets into Israel, and Israeli jets bombed Gaza. By the beginning of July, it was all-out war. Hamas has launched rockets from built-up areas of Gaza, as their own video shows. They've hidden the identity of this fighter as he positions a handcart on this street. But the crude rockets are no match for Israel's Iron Dome. This $500 million anti-missile system has destroyed nearly 90% of the thousands of Hamas rockets which have targeted Israel. In this asymmetric war, Hamas deployed a weapon they too had spent years developing. An even more complex network of tunnels, these ones built under the border into Israel.
Everybody knows that necessity is the mother of invention. These tunnels were dug by the resistance in self-defense against a superior technological and military power.
The Israelis had tried to keep tabs on the tunnel network as it grew, according to a government minister and former spy chief.
The Hamas has built an underground Gaza. And that's a famous tactic in order to use it as a weapon, a terroristic weapon, against the civilians, against soldiers.
Hamas filmed themselves during this war, launching an attack through a tunnel on the Israeli village of Nahal Oz. Their mission was to seize a soldier. They failed, but killed 5 before fleeing back to Gaza. Kidnaps proved a powerful weapon for Hamas. 8 years ago, they seized 1 Israeli soldier and ransomed him for 1,000 of their prisoners.
We capture Israeli soldiers on the battlefield, not civilians. We capture them to release our 7,000 prisoners. When Israel frees our prisoners, we'll no longer need to capture their soldiers.
During this war, the Israelis discovered just how extensive the Hamas tunnel network was, running up to 2 miles from Gaza into southern Israel.
It's pretty deep, isn't it?
This one is 14 meters deep.
An Israeli commander took me into one of Hamas's attack tunnels, which emerges between 2 Israeli villages.
So you see it well designed, so it works very well.
The tunnels are lined with cement, a precious commodity in Gaza, which Israel has tried to restrict with its blockade.
The Hamas used tens of millions of dollars, thousands of tons of cement to build those tunnels.
As the war went on, the Israelis discovered what a huge investment of time and money Hamas had made in these tunnels, dug by hand.
Why didn't you know about these tunnels before?
We were aware of those tunnels, but it's very complicated and it's not enough to find it in Israel because you have to destroy it all the way into Gaza.
And that's just what Israel did. On July the 17th, the Israelis launched a ground offensive that would destroy more than 30 tunnels inside Gaza. Deep underground, these special forces were the first Israelis to probe the tunnels. They used robots to scout the extensive network, to find and disable explosive devices. We can't identify these combat engineers, who've never spoken publicly before.
We have encountered the enemy in the tunnels several times.
And what happened? There was a fight.
Like you would assume.
Our unit lost 1 soldier and several injuries. Well, it's tough when you're losing a soldier, a friend.
The Israeli unit lost that soldier here in Shuja'iyah, scene of one of the most intensive battles of the war. This built-up area in eastern Gaza was the starting point for a series of tunnels. Hamas used them to try and seize Israeli soldiers.
We found sedatives and binding material. I personally witnessed Hamas trying to kidnap soldiers, trying to separate one guy out of the team to pull him away.
The entrance to the tunnel was just 100 meters from this building, the Wafa hospital. It had been hit a week earlier by Israeli shelling. Staff and patients then evacuated the hospital, following a warning from the Israelis. The building then became a flashpoint in the battle.
When we go to the tunnel to deal with it, we took heavy fire from the hospital. And
from inside the hospital? Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm sure about it. They continued to fire at us from the hospital.
The Israelis say their army video shows flashes of fire, Hamas attacking them from inside the Wafa hospital.
We had to bomb the hospital because it was a standing post of Hamas.
The Israelis also claim secondary explosions prove weaponry was being stored at the Wafa hospital.
This is a lie. Israel accuses Hamas of doing this, but has no evidence whatsoever.
Today, much of Shujaya is a wasteland. They're still searching for bodies. This pile of rubble is all that's left of the Wafa hospital. It will cost millions to rebuild it. In the battle, many houses around the hospital were destroyed, thousands made homeless.
I left because the Wafa area was being shelled and bombed from the east. I was afraid for my family, my sons, my grandchildren.
Where's our street? Our house? 25, 30 people are living in it. It's a catastrophe.
200 people, some of them civilians, died in the battle in Shujaya. The question is, did Israel target them, or was Hamas using them as human shields?
You have to ask this question the Hamas. Why are they using civilian spots, schools, hospitals, as their military headquarters? You have no choice if you are in this round of war, hostility, and rockets are launched from these places.
The resistance were trained to defend their people, not to use their people as human shields. Israel is seeking excuses to strike hospitals.
The next chapter in the War of the Tunnels was here in Rafah, in this moonscape of destruction. When Hamas tried to abduct another Israeli soldier, this place became the focus of the so-called Hannibal Directive, an order to bring back soldiers dead or alive.
You are using all the means on the ground, and sometimes you are also asking for an outside backup in order to chase those who kidnapped the soldiers.
On August the 1st, there was a humanitarian ceasefire. Under its terms, this Israeli unit was continuing their mission in Rafah. Hamas killed 2 of them and dragged a 3rd, Lieutenant Hadar Golden, into a tunnel. One of his comrades, Lieutenant Aitan, told me how he carried out the Hannibal Directive.
I decided to go inside the tunnel, so I take with me a group of soldiers, and we go down to the tunnel to look for Adar. And we saw a path of blood, so we knew Adar was dragged inside. We continued about 500, 800 meters.
What was it like in the tunnels?
Very deep and dark, very small, getting claustrophobic.
The tunnel was booby-trapped with explosives.
And we have to go find them. We have to get in, no matter what the cost is.
But the Hannibal Directive didn't save Hadar Golden. He was declared dead the next day. Hamas has still not returned his body. Over the next 2 days, the Israelis bombed Rafah intensively. An estimated 200 Palestinians died. Some were militants, some women and children. Israel's been accused of using indiscriminate force while carrying out the Hannibal Directive.
They blame that we have used it in order to attack civilians in Rafah is a huge mistake.
You deny that?
I'm not only denying, I'm talking about facts.
Israel claimed it only bombed military targets in Rafah. But Asma al-Ghul's family home here was destroyed. Women and children were amongst the dead.
When I heard the news and when I saw the bodies like I know my uncles and others. I feel I am so angry. I'm so angry.
Some of Asma's family belong to Hamas. But as a journalist, she's had her run-ins with the Islamist group, harassed for not wearing a headscarf on the beach.
Your relatives had connections with Hamas. Surely that's why this house was attacked by the Israelis.
Yes, not this uncle at all.
Not this uncle
at all, no. They are not related to Hamas. If they are, I will say that. It's very easy. This is war crime.
The Israeli military says the house was a Hamas command and control center, continuously used to plan terror attacks against Israel. They could not confirm if civilians were there when they bombed it. There's anger across the world over the civilian casualties caused by the Israelis in this conflict. They say they make every effort to avoid them.
The camera's mounted right on the bottom of the plane, and they can just circle around and see everything.
I met one of the Israeli surveillance pilots. We cannot show his face.
We have to make sure there's no people walking around, any civilians or anything like that. So we'll have to have cameras on that area before the bomb is actually dropped.
So if you're carrying out this detailed surveillance, how is it that so many civilians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes?
While we have cameras surveying the area, we can only see what's going on outside. So obviously if people are inside these houses, Israel has developed a whole range of techniques to get the civilians away as far as possible from the battlefield.
One controversial Israeli technique used in this war and over the last 6 years is what they call the knock on the roof. First, a non-explosive warning rocket is fired. The impact is intended to give people a few minutes to get out before the main attack. However, Israel justifies its methods of avoiding civilian casualties. Its bombs have killed hundreds of women and children. So has their military action been disproportionate?
We have warned civilians. The Hamas could avoid many, many losses. So the blame is not on Israel, the blame is on the Hamas. And Israel is sorry for every loss of civilian life.
The UN is now investigating alleged war crimes on both sides. Hamas is accused of using its own people as human shields and firing rockets indiscriminately at civilians in Israel.
First, we do not target Israeli civilians. Second, we don't have accurate, smart missiles like the Israeli military has. Give us those guided missiles, and we'll never launch rockets at just anyone. We'll only target the Israeli military.
On the other side, alleged war crimes by Israel include hitting Palestinian medical staff.
The shrapnel just shattered the windscreen.
On July the 30th, paramedic Ibrahim Abu al-Qais was in this ambulance when a call came. Shujaya was under Israeli fire again.
When we headed for Shujaya, the situation from the start was incredibly dangerous. Every place we went to, we sensed that death was a certainty.
The ambulances were being followed by local TV crews. Ibrahim, one of the first on the scene, went into a building to treat the wounded. Then in the street below him, there was another explosion. 17 people were now dead, including a paramedic and a photographer.
Unfortunately, there's no respect for the uniform or the ambulance. The planes bombing knew we were here. Or after they bombed us the first time, they knew another ambulance would be coming here soon.
The Israeli army told us they are still investigating this incident involving the ambulances in Shujaya. The Israelis have also announced they are investigating possible war crimes by their own forces in 5 other cases. There were no comparable scenes in Israel, like the ones the world saw daily from Gaza's hospitals during the war. And so, arguably, in many countries, Israel's lost the biggest battle in this conflict, the battle for public opinion.
What should Israel do when 5 million civilians are under heavy attack of rockets? We should sit and wait. I'm asking all the international community what they have done if the same would happen in their country against their civilians.
Thousands of Israelis gathered in Tel Aviv as the war drew to a close. The majority of Israelis don't think this conflict had any clear winner. Many of the tunnels are destroyed, but the war cost Israel the lives of 67 soldiers and 6 civilians, and Hamas is still in Gaza, armed with rockets. Many Israelis wanted their army to stay in Gaza until Hamas was crushed. When the ceasefire took hold, Hamas celebrated what they called their victory. They tightened their hold on Gaza, executing people they accused of being Israeli spies. But Hamas have made no solid gains in this war. There's no guarantee the blockade will be lifted, or they'll get the airport and the seaport they're demanding to open Gaza to the outside world.
If the international community doesn't deliver this, or if Israel maneuvers and deceives, we'll fight and resume our struggle. These are our rights, and the whole world will be responsible for keeping Gaza under siege.
The solution is not a military solution. The solution is diplomatic. We have to sit around the tables. Israel is committed to defend its sovereignty, to defend its citizens, and unfortunately, if we will have to do it again, we will do it without hesitation.
Israel's now seized nearly 1,000 acres of the occupied West Bank in response to the killing of the 3 Israeli teenagers. The move's been condemned by the Palestinians and internationally. Last night, 2 Palestinians suspected of kidnapping the 3 boys were killed when the Israeli army tried to capture them. In Gaza, Asma is visiting baby Ibrahim, whose twin brother Mustafa was killed when their home was bombed.
So the shrapnel's still inside?
They said it's very dangerous to take it out. Ibrahim is still alive, but Mustafa, was born in war and killed in the war.
Asma now believes it is Hamas who will reap the advantage from this war.
What Israel did in this war, they are create more generation will belong to resistance and Hamas and jihad. There is a new generation raised in these feelings of revenge, death, blood and war. So how you will change this?
Once again, they're trying to rebuild their lives in Gaza. Peace talks are due to start this week, but people here and in Israel don't believe they've seen the end of war.